They put you ringside.
Yeah.
Fun show. As is tradition, Horiguchi wins. Nasukawa wins. What did you think of this, Joe? Explain to me your experience.
Well, it's always a fantastic experience going to cover the event or going to call the play-by-play. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, what I always try and do, and you guys know me well enough that I'm going to stay politically correct. I do my best not to show any sort of bias whatsoever when I'm calling fights. But there were some times in some of the bouts where I was like, well, let me. I don't mean to rock the boat here, and I'm never guilty of doing that. But I thought I had to with some of the fights. The Damian Brown Takeda fight. It was at the point where I was like, hey man, like you're here fighting in Japan. You're not fighting anywhere else. The only way you generally get asked to return is by putting on, performance of the nights. I didn't think Damian Brown did that, although he did emerge victorious, and it's a tough fight. He's gone through a lot, especially with his PTSD, excuse me. So good on him. He did what he had to do. I was very impressed with Kanako Murata. She took that fight on 5 days.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Were you?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that finish.
Yeah. So, so for those that watched the fight and heard me and Frank calling it, the angle of the Von Flue choke was on the opposite side of us.
It was amazing.
It was ridiculous, and we had a really in-depth conversation afterwards, especially with Jason Herzog, and he brought up the same thing that I brought up whenever OSP gets that Von Flue choke that Sean and I had discussed. Is the difference of when you're wearing gloves and when you're not wearing gloves, and the ability to trap at where the glove starts, making it impossible to pull out. And the way Murata had set it up, because she was in mount. And I was like,
yes.
Wow, she's got to figure this out. And next thing you know, we saw the tap, and we're like, whoa, what just happened here? Because we couldn't see the opposite side. Even our screen that had the actual footage from Fuji TV or what they were recording live to tape, we couldn't see that side. So before we could even look at each other, Frank and I, and say, was that a Von Flue choke? It was done. It was absolutely fantastic. So I'm telling you guys right now, both you two, everyone tuning in right now, everyone listening to the show later on, remember the name Kanako Murata. You're going to hear a lot more about her very, very soon. As for the main event was a bit of a challenge because, Muhammad Lawal didn't look, he fatigued. It could be age. It could just be, it is what it is. Prohaska just kept putting the pressure on. He emerged victorious. And of course, Nasukawa, despite coming off that exhibition boxing fight loss to Floyd Mayweather, just looked ridiculous. His opponent, Fritz Biagtan, was just taking a beating and just kept coming back. So good on Fritz for taking it, but eventually the better fight won. And then Horiguchi is just Horiguchi. The speed. Ben Nguyen tried to take away space. Did his very best to take away space, and Horiguchi had none of it. Just destroyed him. It was unbelievable.
Horiguchi is amazing. I got to see him and Mighty Mouse fight again at some point. I don't know how it'll happen, but I would love to see that happening. The Von Flue choke has turned into a running joke on this show that is a legit offensive tactic now. Like, if you give someone like Murata that little bit of space, she makes it work. And I've not seen one pulled off in MMA like this. So I love that. I thought that was very cool. Really awesome. Let's talk about King Mo. This is a guy who I'm sure the three of us remember as 27-year-old prospect out of Sengoku that was highly touted. And he talked about, I fight at money weight. I'll fight at whatever weight. And he has done that throughout his career. He is the guy that went on a run and beat Gegard Musashi in an absolutely dreadful fight, boring fight. I was there live. And ever since then, it's been up and down. He did have that outstanding streak in Bellator and Rizin for a while, but he's had an issue with consistency. And a lot of that, has been highlighted by the back of Emmanuel Newton's hand. But of late, he never has had a streak like this, where he's like 2-5, over 7 fights, where he's lost 3 fights in a row. Oh, by the way, he got finished in all 3 of those fights, and they were all within the last year. James, what do you see for the future of a King Mo? Because he is not at that level anymore.
Yeah, it's getting to that point where, we need to have that talk. I think, when you start losing like this, where you're getting knocked out consecutively, it's bad news. We saw this with Chuck Liddell. I think Mo's in that territory now. Now, granted, he's fighting really good guys. Bader, Liam McGeary, Yuri. But nonetheless, I don't know how much is left for him. Like, I think at this point, it's probably best for him to quit while he's ahead, maybe get one more fight for Rizin, get sort of a tomato cannon there, come off a win. But I mean, he can't compete at a high level anymore. That's the reality of it. Consider what he's gone through with injuries. I mean, remember he had that staph infection. There were times
died.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, the fact that he was able to overcome that and go on. I mean, there was a point between 2014 and 2015, including the win over Yuri, the last time they fought in Rizin, where he was on like an incredible winning streak. So that King Mo unfortunately is gone. I think he's 2-6 in his last 2-5 in his last 7 fights. So it's not looking good for a 38-year-old in King Mo.
And it's very clear he's fought the likes of Phil Davis, Crocott, Bader, McGeary. And then when he takes on Jiri, I think that's the point where you say no more. I like your idea of him facing maybe an easy opponent. That way in the future, if he ever does get the itch to come back, he can at least say that he's coming off of a win or something like that. I honestly wouldn't hate if Bellator booked him against Tito or something like that. They could throw that on there and watch that misery just unfold. Joe, you had a front row seat to see this. So what are you expecting out of King Mo?
I don't know. I don't know what to say, to be honest with you, but no hard feelings against the guy. It's sometimes you get to a point in your career where you just can't compete at that high level anymore. And we saw it in this Prohaska fight because as Prohaska, King Mo's corner was just, I don't know if you guys caught it on the mic because it was over to our left, but they were pleading with him, just take him down to the ground, stop exchanging. And then when he did try to go get some takedowns, Yuri either got up or defended. But by the time he was able to defend them, Mo was tired. Mo was exhausted in that third round. So it's tough to say. Sometimes I don't know if he just got too comfortable with his, striking. Got to go back to the well, do what you're good at, and just take him down and control him. And if you got to win that way, try and get a TKO or judge's decision, that's fine. But again, it was what it was. What can you do? I don't know where he goes from here. Like James said, maybe it's time we had that talk.
Rizin, as a whole, very fun show and a very uncharacteristic, 5 decisions in a row? Never see that coming on a Rizin show, Joe.
So that was the conversation that I had with our liaison and as well as Frank Trigg, because as the night was going on, I'm not used to calling decisions. Yeah. Right? They happen. They happen at every single Rizin event, but not at the frequency that was going on. And some of the excitement factor wasn't there for some of the fights because some of them were just ridiculously awesome. But you got to give credit where credit is due. Fighters sometimes get in there and they neutralize each other. Styles will neutralize styles, and it is what it is. But as always, you're expecting more from a Rizin event sometimes, and it was fantastic. Don't get me wrong, because there were finishes, but I think you're right. There were more decisions that or more fights that went long than we expected.
What do you think is next for Kyoji Horiguchi?
Oh, damn it! I don't know. I don't know. There's got to be a title fight. There's got to be him defending that title. It's tough to say. I know Manel Cape really wants to get that rematch. He's angling for the title. Manel did emerge victorious. What do I think is next for Horiguchi? Bellator. He's got to fight Darian Caldwell in New York. I think that's what they're going to start working on, and I think they want to, because the way Rizin and Bellator, that relationship and the way it's working, and I'll tell you something right now, guys. There's a bit of a relationship with Rizin and the UFC. Nothing big, nothing spectacular, but don't be surprised if you start seeing fighters going back and forth. But in terms of Horiguchi, that fight, what is it, June or July in New York for Bellator? I think they're going to angle to get that rematch with Caldwell and try and get that Bellator gold around Horiguchi's waist.
I think that would be a good thing, because a star who's not necessarily a big star in the UFC could go over to Rizin, add a little bit of name value to a card, and then somebody like Horiguchi can come over to the UFC if so desired and really get a high-level performance, beat a lot of their guys. I'm thinking, hey, is Masakatsu still fighting? Is he still in Pancrase?
I think so.
I mean,
he's been. I don't think he's fighting. I don't think he's fighting.
I think he fought last year.
Did he?
I think last year he fought for their bantamweight title.
Wow.
Throw him in there against Horiguchi. Let Horiguchi avenge that loss. Why not? Yeah.
Stone Osborne. I don't think they'll do a co-promotion with one. I don't think it's going to happen at all. Joseph Bozo did mention that it's Bellator 222. That's the Chael Sonnen Lyoto Machida fight. But Joseph Bozo posed a good question on the chat. I think us three should discuss quickly. He stated Kyoji Horiguchi has won 12 straight. Should the UFC be embarrassed that they let him go?
Yeah. I mean, if that is the best place to fight, then for sure. James, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I understand why they released him, but if you want to call yourself the best organization in the world, you don't just let someone like that go that's like extremely talented. There's a few guys that they've released that, you know, maybe at the time were like, whatever, but I mean, that's one that's going to bite them because he's so talented. And, you know, just look at the guys he's defeated. It's incredible what he's been able to do even after leaving the UFC.
Yeah, I don't think he was technically released per se by the UFC. I believe the offer wasn't what they were happy to accept. Therefore, what in essence, and the fact that Horiguchi's master was dying of cancer, he'd also decided, you know what, I want to go back home. I want to compete at home. I want my master to come to my fights. He passed away last year, but he was able to come to some of Horiguchi's fights. That was a massive decision for Horiguchi to make because he said, you know what, this is who created me. This is who brought me. This is what I want to do moving forward. I'm still young. I can still do a lot of things. Remember, he trains at ATT in Coconut Creek. So he's in the States a lot. I even had a conversation with Mike Thomas Brown at length about Kyoji, and just the smiles that Mike Brown has on his face every time you mention Horiguchi. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think this Bellator fight's going to take place. I don't think the UFC is all that upset, especially that he was competing at 125 then. Now he's fighting really at 135 for Rizin. So you can imagine some of the names, and you go up and down this list of the top 15. You tell me where he would slot in. And you look at some of these names, top 15 at the UFC ranking. So yeah, I think Horiguchi would do just as good as he's doing right now in Rizin as he would in the UFC. So